Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.4 AD carry tier list. So if you enjoy this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It does help other people find it. Check out the rest of the stuff that we have on the channel as well. I just did a support tier list video yesterday. I also have patch notes, and then I'm going to do a jungle tier list and probably a mid tier list for this patch as well. I might see if I can sneak in top. Also, be sure to check all that out. Also stream most nights starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go till about 2 a.m., so drop by, check it out. Feel free to ask any questions that you'd like. I try to be as interactive as possible with the chat. It's a really good community. It's a good time for everybody, so come join us sometime. All right, let's go ahead and get in here. Okay, so I just want to talk really quickly about how the meta might be shifting around AD carry right now, and I talk about this some more in the support tier list video and the patch notes video, but the hyper carry AD carries are definitely coming back into focus now, so we're going to be seeing a lot more Jinx, a lot more Vayne, those type of champions, and less things like Misfortune, Jhin, and these sort of lame bully champions, with the exception of Draven. You'll still see quite a bit of Draven, I think. But a lot of that is due to the enchanters becoming a lot stronger over time, damage being taken out of the game in the early game through some of the jungle nerfs, ignite nerfs, nerfs to some of the really aggressive supports like the Zyras, Brands, Threshes, that kind of stuff, and potentially the return of tanks. So we might start seeing more tanks in the top lane after the excessive nerf to Conquer on this patch. I don't know if excessive is the right word, but extensive nerf might be a better word, because I think that it was justified. So we might start seeing things like Shen, Malachi, and still a lot of Sion in the top lane, potentially. So all of these line up very well for hyper carry AD carries. So as far as this patch itself, and this has been going on, like this didn't just magically happen on this patch. I've been talking about this and covering this, you know, and predicting this trend over the last 6 patches or so. It's been moving towards that really ever since the nerf to Dark Harvest and the buff to the Forbidden Idol items, which happened near the end of the preseason. But, okay, so the Lucian nerf doesn't really matter. If we look at the patch notes here, they nerfed his W damage and his mana cost. He doesn't even need to do that build. That's just a cute little build that he could do sometimes in, like, Challenge or Elo. But, like, his real strength lies in the rest of his kit. And we'll talk about Lucian here in a little bit as we go down the tier list. I still think he's going to be number 1. But this really doesn't matter at all, so don't worry about Lucian. He's going to be fine with that build. I still think that Qmax is better for most people anyway, so it's about as irrelevant as it gets for a nerf to Lucian. The Conqueror nerf does have some ramifications. First of all, it's a direct nerf to Draven. I think you're going to have to run a different keystone on Draven. I'm actually going to recommend that people start switching over to Kleptomancy on Draven. We'll talk about why here in a little bit, but I think the new Conqueror is just absolutely trash on him. It just takes way, way too long to stack up, and he really wants to do most of his damage in the first couple of hits on somebody. So Draven wants to take small but like really powerful trades, or he wants to go for all ends that should be over very quickly. So he doesn't want to have to throw like 5 auto attacks at somebody to stack that up. It's just going to be too slow for him. The Conqueror nerf is also going to empower tanks in the top lane, so I think it's going to dial back a bunch of Conqueror users in the top lane. So it's going to hurt Yorick, it's going to hurt Darius. To a lesser extent, it'll hurt Riven. Riven's still going to be pretty good. She can stack it up quickly because her Q, the damage off of the Q, plus the auto attack following the Q, does actually stack it pretty quickly. Conqueror has a lot of really weird interactions. I talked about that in my support tier list video, so be sure to check out the beginning of that if you want to know. But basically, it doesn't work out the way that I thought it initially did in the patch notes. There are very few like ways to manipulate the stacking out there. So a lot of the cute things you might think of, like, oh, well, Ashe's Flurry or Graves' Buckshot, things that trigger Black Cleaver don't usually work with it, with the exception of Urgot. Urgot's W does work with it, unless they hotfix that. They did hotfix the damage, by the way, on Conqueror, so I thought it wasn't that great anyways after the changes, because you can't trigger it on enough different champions, and apparently they hotfixed it even more on the same day and dropped the damage by like 1/3 later on. Right, so they took the maximum down to 50 from 75, so that's a tremendous nerf to it. And on ranged, the stack only lasts for 2 seconds, so it's really easy to drop it off. So I think it's going to be pretty bad on ranged champs now, for the most part. I mean, you might still see something like an Azir or a Cassiopeia maybe try this out, but Azir doesn't... I mean, I guess Lethal Tempo is still really good on Azir, but I don't know. I don't expect it to be that big of a deal, particularly for AD carries. But the overall trend then is a lot of these champions are going to get hurt that ran the old Conqueror, the 20% true damage Conqueror. And so that's going to create more space for tanks to come back, potentially, especially in the top lane, where they had to face Conquer users, like, all the time. So Sion's already good. He did get nerfed last patch, I believe, and so, you know, he got dialed back a little bit, but he's still going to be pretty strong in the top lane. And then I think that Shen's going to make a comeback in a big way, particularly in the pro scene, but also maybe in the solo queue scene. He's not really that bad. He's still pretty good, I think. It was just he had a hard time dealing with Conquer users. Now, Shen in particular as a tank is useful because he has that global ult, of course, so that allows him to split push and effectively have 2 teleports. So that's really powerful. And he's also a pretty good duelist against a lot of these champions, these auto-attack champions in the top lane. At least for, like, maybe the first 3 items or so. You know, they're still going to outscale him. The Jax, the Camille, the Fiora, all that stuff is still going to beat him down when they get to, like, 3 or 4 items. That's going to be very late in most games, though. That's going to be, like, you know, 30 minutes into the game is when he'll stop being able to hang with them, assuming that the game is even. So he can hold out for a very long time against some of these split pushers, and then he's going to be able to teleport to the fights, and they won't most of the time. And then he can also, so he can, you know, use his ult to get to the fight and then teleport back up there so he doesn't even lose a tower in the trade. So I think that's going to make him very strong in pro play, and you might even see him in solo queue a little bit. He is one of the tanks that can, you know, almost serve as a solo carry type of function because he is such a good splitter and he is such a good duelist against a lot of champions out there. He's pretty good against other tanks too, I think. He's not going to be like the best tank breaker out there that's also a tank, but he has a lot of percentage health damage that he can do. And then Maokai, I think, is going to be the best team fighter up top in the sense that he has just a ton of CC, he has pretty high base damages, and he has a lot of healing. It's very, very difficult to cut through a Maokai and all of his stuff that he has going on. So I think he'll be a really good team fighter. So that means that this is going to empower, if we do start seeing those types of things in the top lane, and I think that pro play might have to model this first before people get off of their Conquer, you know, Yorick's top lane. I think Yorick's still going to be pretty good. But solo queue is usually pretty slow to adapt to this stuff because a lot of the all caps content creators don't really try to predict things like this as much. They just sort of talk about like what's happening, and they're always sort of a step behind. They just talk about what pros are already doing. I try to be proactive and predict ahead of time what's going to happen before it happens so that you can be early to the scene. I'm not always right about that stuff, but I at least make an attempt to sort of help you understand my perspective on the meta and where I think it's going. And then you can decide for yourself whether you think that that's going to be accurate or something that you want to do. But I think that this is going to empower Jinx and Vayne. I was, you know, one of the few people that was calling Jinx last patch. You know, as soon as I saw those crit changes, I was like, Jinx, 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 Jinx. You know, and I explained a lot of that. But we'll talk about her also on this tier list, why she's particularly strong with the way that they changed the AD carry items. But I think Vayne's also coming up quite a bit. Thresh nerf is going to make it even better for immobile AD carry, so Jinx primarily, but other champs that have like a hard time dodging Thresh hooks, this is going to help them out. We will probably see a little bit less Thresh, but I still think he's going to be strong in general. This is a pretty substantial nerf to most solo queue Threshes under Diamond. You know, the hook cooldown being 4 extra seconds at lower level is a big deal. That means you can punish him a lot more whenever he misses hooks, and then it costs more mana as well. So I still think we'll see Thresh in pro play. I think he'll still be pretty good at higher elo, and pretty good overall. He has like a 52% win rate. But now there's more counterplay to him, and it's more likely that he's going to get outscaled by Nami and Sona. So we'll see. He'll still be pretty good. He'll still be pretty good. But at the same time, if we do see him a little bit less, or he's just a little bit less effective, that is a slight nudge to champions like Jinx, like Ashe, that don't have very good ways to dodge his hooks. Or all the Ezreals out there that can dodge his hooks, but usually don't. So overall, it's going to buff the AD carries to nerf Thresh, I think. Hecarim and Zed, however, are getting buffs on this patch, and they are really strong diver champions. It's very difficult for supports to peel those champions off, because Zed can just ult right through most of their stuff, most of their CC they're going to use, in Hecarim, same deal. He can just ult through it. Now, Hecarim takes a long time to come online. I think people will start playing him, but, you know, he doesn't really get to kind of that one-shot potential until later, because usually he has to get Cinderhulk first, then he gets Trinity. And he's going to be very squishy with that build because Cinderhulk doesn't really empower Trinity at all. Like, they don't scale very well together. But then once he starts getting, you know, either Spirit Visage or Dead Man's Plate or something after that, that's when he starts to come online. And, like, you know, the third item is where he gets really dangerous. But they're, you know, champions, AD carries that can get some defensive stuff against these type of champs will be good. So, like, Phantom Dancer gains a little bit of value. If the AD carry can get Tabby, like Lucian or Ezreal, just in case Zed or Hecarim gets fed. Not to say you have to get these every time, but if you have the option, if the AD carry has the option of getting these, it's useful. Any, like, HP, like Lucian, again, can get Black Cleaver. That gives him extra HP. All of those are going to become just a little bit more valuable on this patch. Essence Reaver, pretty decent third item for champions like Ashe, Sivir, Xayah, and even Jhin. I think a lot of people potentially underestimate this item on Jhin. Having flat AD and flat crit is really good because Jhin does not convert attack speed very well to flat AD. People get Zeal items on him anyways, but now that there is something that actually has raw, real AD and a lot of raw crit on it, I think that's a lot better, and I think that's like very, very overlooked as far as the budget goes. It's 118% effective. We'll talk about it when we get down to Jhin. Actually, we may not talk about Jhin that much because he's... no, he's still down there in Tier 3. He's the very last person, so he snuck in there. But I think that a lot of people really underestimate that because he just wants the flat AD. He wants the crit. Attack speed sucks on him because he doesn't scale with attack speed. Like I said, it does convert over to AD, but it's not a very good conversion rate. And most of those Zeal items are not very efficient. So, like, Rapid Fire does give him the extra range, which is nice. But it's only, like, 80% efficient by itself when something like Essence Reaver... is going to be 118% efficient. And he can really leverage the cooldown reduction as well. The mana is like kind of whatever. It's helpful on him. So he can like wave clear with grenades faster. But I still think that's something that people should consider a little bit more than perhaps they do. So for instance, you could go something like Infinity Edge and then Rapid Fire and then Essence Reaver if you want to. Or Infinity Edge, Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire. So you can still get your Zeal item. I just think this should be mixed in here instead of the second Zeal item. Overall for Jhin is your third item. I guess you can get Phantom Dancer as well. But anyways, slight nerf to Sivir. You know, they took away 10% of her bounce damage on her W, which does matter, the scaling on it, but she'll still probably be about in the same capacity she is right now. And then Nunu and Ivern are also very strong right now, and they're climbing up a lot as junglers, and so that means that your hyperscaling AD carries gain even more value. So your Jinxes, your Vaynes, your Twitches, because you're going to need that hard damage to make up for the lack of damage that you're going to have in the jungle, and he's going to be able to help peel and protect you even more. And so it's not going to be uncommon to see something like an Ivern or a Nunu in the jungle and then like a Sona or a Nami in the bot lane. And so you want to have just a ton of raw power so that it's worth protecting. You know, if you're playing something like Ezreal that's also, you know, going to be slippery, but it's not going to have like that hyper carry, you know, like super auto attack focus there, then you're losing out on a little bit of the value of running something like Nunu or Ivern in the jungle. But anyway, so everything's kind of nodding towards hyper carries is the main takeaway here. Okay, let's get in here. Okay, so Lucian, I've talked about him a lot every patch, so I'll just try to make it relatively brief for me. He's just overpowered. He still is. They nerfed his W too much, and you might be asking, well, what's wrong with him? He actually doesn't have the highest win rates right now, and you know, one of my theories are that he gets banned so much that people just don't get to practice him that much. But I'll tell you, like, whenever there's a Lucian on my team, it just feels like it's almost an auto win. It's not quite like that crazy, but he's not that far off of these other champs. I mean, he's 52.3. Jinx is almost 55, which is really high. But a lot of these AD carries are going to be like between 54 and 52, which also notice, by the way, this is very, very high for like 15 AD carries deep. This is like almost every major AD carry is going to be over 52%, which is insane. I mean, AD carry might actually be the highest win rate role across like all of the major players of anything out there. Now, part of that is because people don't play as much weird stuff in AD carry as they do in other roles. You know, mid lane, there's probably like 50 different champions that you could pick and be like okay on if you're good at it. Same thing for top lane. Jungle, a little bit less so, but there's still quite a lot of junglers that people try to make work. Support, you know, sometimes people play really goofy stuff in support. There's the good stuff, but then there's the goofy stuff too. With AD carry, people don't goof around that much. They're all kind of like very, very standardized. That's part of why you see the same AD carries like almost every game, right? You're always seeing Ezreal, Lucian, Vayne, Kai'Sa. Pretty much every game is because it's so standardized, right? Like how you play it and what people want to play and what's effective. So it's like the least diverse role is what I'm trying to say. So yes, it does have a lot of high win rate stuff, but that's also like on average between all this stuff. But part of that is also people just don't play goofy stuff, and people get a lot of practice on the same types of champs as AD carry versus a lot of other roles. But anyways, Lucian's still going to be like super powerful, and what makes Lucian powerful is he's just so good with so many different items, and he has a really good blend of both offense, defense, early game, late game, and utility, all in one kit, which is crazy. So early game, he does a ton of damage because his Q, you know, even at early levels like level 5, is going to do 155 base damage. It also scales with 90% of your bonus AD, and it triggers your passive, which pretty much gives you like half of a critical strike, right? So it does, you know, 50% extra damage, sometimes more. So, you know, and that's total AD. So if you're hitting them for, I don't know, you have like 80 AD early, that's 40 damage. On top of this, that's 125 damage, plus, you know, an additional 90% of your bonus AD, which early on, maybe that's only like 10 extra damage or something like that. But even still, that's like 145 damage for 50 mana on an 80 carry that also scales. That's what's disgusting about him. That's like you're almost getting a 3-to-1 payout for how much mana you're putting in versus how much damage you're dealing. And that's just one ability with like one auto attack trait in there. So that's part of what makes him really nasty, is he has so much base damage in all of his abilities early, and then the way this Light Slinger work just allows him to abuse so many different mechanics in the game. So he gets Press the Attack online really quickly, which has pretty high base damage. If we go over here and look at PTA, has pretty high burst for early. I mean, it's an extra like probably 50 or 60 damage early on, and then it triggers the extra, you know, 9% damage or whatever, 9 or 10% damage, but it's that extra 60 burst that you get off of that too. That's on a pretty low cooldown. It's only on a 6-second cooldown, so you can trade that a lot. So that's not quite like Electrocute level damage, but it's pretty damn close, and it's on a 6-second cooldown. So that's the thing, on a champion that can like use this repeatedly very easily. It's just like basically auto attack, ability, auto attack, and you have it. So it's just like, you know, auto Q auto, you got it, or auto dash auto, you got it. You know, there's so many different ways you can trigger Press the Attack on somebody. So he abuses that really well. He abuses Blade of the Ruined King because of each one of those auto attacks does trigger Blade of the Ruined King as well. So he gets a ton of damage off of that. Blade, even against a low damage target, is going to be doing something around, like, even if they have 1,000 health, you know, their average health, if you take them from 100 to 0, is going to be 500. 8% of 500 is like 40. So it's still going to be doing 40 on-hit damage, even against a squishy target, and like triggering that twice on average is 80 damage, you know, in addition to the 40 AD that it provides. So it's just an obscene amount of damage that also scales versus tanks later in the game. It also has that active, which gives him an additional 100 burst, and it's modified by things like Press the Attack. So if you have Press the Attack on him, then that bonus damage that you're doing on Black Cleaver is also doing an extra 10% damage. If you have, or that you're doing off of Press the Attack is doing extra damage. Then you also have Black Cleaver, which is going to be shredding armor, which also combines with his passive. So now you're shredding their armor super quickly, you're doing Press the Attack super quickly, and you're getting Blade of the Ruined King super quickly, and all those work with each other. So like the armor shred and Press the Attack buffs up how much the Blade of the Ruined King you're doing as well. The Press the Attack, yeah, all of that just goes together. Okay, so like those three things, that trinity of stuff there, the double shots combined with Blade of the Ruined King, Press the Attack, and Black Cleaver is just disgusting. It gives you so much survivability between lifesteal, the extra mobility off of the Blade passive, the burst damage off of the Press the Attack triggering, and the Blade of the Ruined King active, and then the extra health off of Black Cleaver, so you have 400 extra health, which protects you against assassins and all-ins, and then it also gives you extra movement speed off of the phage on that, so you can run people down or kite people even better. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's too much. He does burst damage, has a ton of survivability. He can even get Ninja Tabby and still have enough damage left over to murder people. So, you know, he's very sturdy. He does a lot of damage. He has a lot of utility. Don't forget that Press the Attack and Black Cleaver also apply for your entire team. It's not just you do 24% physical damage with Black Cleaver. It's 24% of the armor is shredded. So when that Malachi is like coming up to your team, you can shred 24% of that armor, and your whole team gets 24% extra physical damage to beat down that Malachi, or that Shin, right? And then the press the attack also triggers for your whole team. It's not just 10% for you, it's 10% for everybody. So he just has this huge buff, which allows you to knock down tanks a lot easier than you should be able to, and they also synergize so well with each other. And then after that, he can just kick it in a high gear late game too by getting something like a Phantom Dancer and an Infinity Edge, and then he just like, not only, he just like takes his burst into overdrive once he hits those 3 to 4 items, so he never really falls off. You know, he's awesome at 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, you count it. However many items you want to get on him, it's going to be broken. So that's the issue. And he's super mobile too. Like, it's so hard to hit him with stuff. Even if there's like a really dangerous team fight, he can just use his ult and, you know, do a casual, whatever it is, 1500 damage or something. You know, just a casual 1500 damage with 750% of your total AD, not bonus AD, total, including your base AD. And by the way, each one of these little bolts, that's right, you guessed it, triggers Black Cleaver. So you get instant Black Cleaver like on their whole team off of this. And that Black Cleaver, because this is physical damage, means they're taking an extra 24% off of this, most of this. You know, 4 of these little shots, it fires 30 shots. 4 of them are going to, or 6 of them, I guess, are going to max out the Black Cleaver, and then the other 24 are going to do the 24% extra damage. So, and if you already have Press the Attack triggered on them, that's going to work with this as well. So it's just too much damage, too powerful, too ridiculous, probably still going to be permabanned. They just need to nerf the damage on his ult, or, you know, maybe in an extreme case, like just not have his Q proc on hit. I mean, that might be kind of lame, but something needs to be done about him. He's overpowered as hell. So anyways, if he's open, you definitely need to take him if you can play him at all. And then just go Press the Attack, Overheal, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, and then Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. I still think Absolute and Gathering are the way to go on him. Some of the other champs are going to be getting things like Ravenous Hunter and Taste of Blood. You can get that in a really tough lane if you want to. I think Overheal is super overpowered and still overrated on a lot of people. If you ever look at that rune on a champion that gets Lifesteal, it's going to block like 3,000 or 4,000 damage in like a 25-minute game. It's crazy how much damage you block off of that. And so because he's rushing a Lifesteal item with Blather and King, I would much rather have Overheal. And particularly if you have something like a Sona or a Nami on your team that's also going to be healing you up, then that's what I would get. He's also phenomenal with Nami, who is the best support right now, because each one of his double shots also triggers her E from the on hit. So you get a ton of extra burst off of her E. And just her ability to speed you up and, you know, slow other people down, just because he's such a kind of like a short range tempo kind of AD carry. Like, he wants to be really mobile and to dodge stuff and to get around to run people down. Then that's going to make her kit work really, really well with him. So, very strong champ. Very good with Ardent Sensor as well, because each one of those double shots is also going to trigger Ardent Sensor for that extra on-hit damage. So, super overpowered, super strong. Definitely play him a lot anytime he's up. Okay, let's talk about Jinx again here. So, I talked about her a lot last patch. You might be wondering, well, why is Jinx gaining so much power right now overall? What is it about Jinx? And the reason is it's the way that they balanced Infinity Edge and Hurricane. So Hurricane and Infinity Edge are the two best ones, the two best crit items right now. And I did a lot of the math in the last video. I'm not going to do all the math again. But the general gist of it is that Hurricane is the best because it got its cost reduced, and it really didn't lose anything other than the crit in order to get that. Most of the other items like Static Shiv and Rapid Fire, I believe, lost some of their attack speed. Phantom Dancer lost like 10% attack speed. I think the other ones lost something. They may have lost like 5% attack speed or some move speed or something. I don't remember. But you traded down 5% critical strike in order to get the item 200 gold cheaper, which is at cost. 5% crit is worth 200 gold. So that's a really, really good extra power spike for her. And being able to rush Infinity Edge is so strong because of the interaction with her fish bones, if you didn't know this. So, basically, for 10% bonus additional damage. Yeah, so the bonus can critical strike as well, which is something they changed about her recently. So basically, how the interaction with crit and fish bones works particularly with Hurricane, is a staggering amount of damage. Okay, so Hurricane, if we look this item up, basically whenever you fire, you're gonna like shoot these little bolts out, right? Like everybody knows that about Hurricane. And each one of those bolts is going to deal 40% of your total AD damage, and the bolts can critically strike to do an additional 10% damage. Okay, so people know that about it. So basically, each time you auto attack, it's like you're getting a little bit more than a crit, because you're doing 180% AD as long as 3 targets are close. And that's what makes this so strong. And each one of those bolts can also crit. So that's part of what makes this strong, is it's like guarantee. In team fights, you're getting full value out of that every single auto attack, versus something like Static Shiv that's only going to have that one little burst of damage every now and then whenever you get the Energize stacked. And the same is true of Rapid Fire Cannon. You just get that one long range attack. That's why Rapid Fire Cannon is garbage on Jinx. Do not get that item, please. At least not as your second item, not as your first Zeal item. You need to get Hurricane. And the reason is each one of those little bolts turns into a rocket. That's right. Each bolt turns into a Jinx rocket when it's fired. Why is that important? Because it does additional AoE. Okay, that's a special interaction with Jinx that so many people don't know about. So what this means is you can actually end up hitting the same target if they're near other targets. So let's say that the AD carry that you start attacking is in the middle of a creep wave. You auto attack them with your rockets with Ruinant's Hurricane. What happens is your normal attack's going to hit them for the 10% extra damage off of the Pow Pow rockets or whatever, right? They deal 10% bonus physical damage. But then each one of the bolts is going to hit a minion near them, and it's going to splash because it's a rocket, and that's also going to hit them. So that is the power behind this. Usually Ruinant's Hurricane only spreads out the damage among different people, but it doesn't instantly spike one person a lot. But this can spike a single person if they're close to other people. It's going to spike everybody if they're close. So everybody's taking 3 hits. That's 9 total hits off of one shot of Ruinant's Hurricane if people are close together. But even if it's an 80 carry just against minions, you're going to hit them with the normal hit. Then you're doing the extra, if you have Infinity Edge, then you're doing the extra 40% AD. And then if that actually crits, then that ends up going up to what that turns into 50%, so that's 90%. That's 180%. Your normal one is going to be 225%. So it's going to be like over a 400% hit. So even if you have like 200 AD, that's like an 800 crit or more. And it hits every single person in that. So each one of those 3 people is going to take those 3 hits for 9 total hits. So that's what's crazy about it, is the Fishbones rockets just deal an insane amount of damage, especially AoE damage with Ruinant's Hurricanes. That's great for wave clearing. That's good for team fight clearing, where you just like murder everybody. So that's what's so strong, is that she scales so well off of that. She has a ton of range or a ton of attack speed, so she can take towers quickly, she can take barons quickly, but then she can also hang out really far in the back, fire those rockets, and just completely decimate everybody because of the interaction between those Hurricanes and her Fishbones rockets. On top of that, she also has Chompers, so that's pretty good like defense. People can't jump or dash through the Chompers anymore. And it's really good for chaining together if you have a support that has CC on it. So you have a Leona that goes in, you can drop Chompers on them, or a Thresh that grabs somebody, Nami that bubbles somebody. Whatever it is, you can drop those Chompers on them. And it's probably going to hit them. You can even have a slight delay on it. It arms after 0.7 seconds. So like Nami bubbles somebody, you drop Chompers on them. You still have like, I don't know, half a second to think about it before you drop the Chompers, and it'll still stun them, because Nami's bubble is 1.5 seconds. And then it's going to stun them for, I think isn't it a second and a half? Dealing magic damage over 1.5 seconds. It arms after this amount. Root them for the same duration. Yeah. So that's a 3-second CC chain between Nami and Jinx. So it's really strong, and it does pretty decent damage too, 70 damage. That's going to allow you to hit them like, I don't know, 4 times before they wake up out of that in the early game. They're definitely going to die. And then a pretty low cooldown, like super high damage execute on her ult. So She's just very strong. You just go Infinity Edge, Hurricane, and then I would recommend probably getting Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer's super strong right now. That shield is very, very valuable, and it would give you some extra crit, attack speed, and move speed. So, and Ghosting, which don't forget, Ghosting is very nice in the laning phase particularly, or if you just have a team fight in the middle of a bunch of minions, you can actually run through those minions and not get creep blocked. So, that's pretty handy as well. So that's why Jinx is like rising quickly up to you know, the stratosphere in solo queue right now. She's almost got a 55% win rate off of a champion that's picked almost 16%, which is insane. That's like overpowered territory. Once something starts getting pretty far north of 54%, and it has over like a 10% pick rate, that's really overpowered most of the time. So I would not be surprised if they nerf Jinx over the next few patches at some point. It might come down to if she gets played a lot in pro play. I could definitely envision some Protect the Jinx comps. Things that are going to run like Jinx plus Orianna plus Shen, or Jinx plus, you know, Nami plus Ivern in the jungle, or like Nunu plus Jinx in pro play. I could see a lot of different comps that could benefit heavily from a Jinx. Particularly if over the next couple of patches they end up nerfing Lucian and Ezreal, which I'm pretty sure they're going to have to. If they nerf those, then Jinx will definitely, I think, show up a little bit. Kind of like the old Protect the Kog'Maw, but she's just a better candidate for that right now in the current meta. Okay, so Jinx really strong. I think just lethal tempo, getting that extra attack speed, crank out those rockets even faster. Overheal, Bloodline, coup de grace. You don't really get... You can also go fleet footwork if it's kind of a tougher lane. I still like overheal, particularly if you have a Nami or a Sona, something like that. Getting the extra lifesteal is nice. You can also go Alacrity. You could just go Alacrity and Triumph if you don't really care about the overheal that much. I think it's really strong, but you don't get a lifesteal item until much later. You could get Bloodthirster later on, but it's kind of up to you. And then Hurricane, Infinity Edge, and then either Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer. Static Shiv is going to provide a lot more wave clear, but you're already going to have a ton by that point. So I'd probably go Phantom Dancer. Got a lot more respect for that item after, you know, seeing people play with it over this last patch or so. Okay, Draven's still going to be pretty strong. Now, he did take a really hard hit to Conquer. So remember, Conquer now, it takes 5 hits to stack up, and he does not have any way to shortcut it. Using his Q does not count as damage to stack Conquer. You'd have to hit him with your ult, which can only stack it once, even if you hit him with both parts of your ult, or your stand aside with your E. It's just going to take way too long to proc. So a lot of Dravens are still trying to force it. I think, honestly, a lot of people, even pro people, just don't really read the patch notes that close, or they just force stuff without thinking about it that carefully. They're obviously very smart, very good players, but I think some of them are very slow to adapt to meta changes, and they just kind of play what they're comfortable on. But I think Draven's going to have to change after this, just because... like I said, it's just going to be way too, like, if you think of how fights go with Draven, usually it's auto attack, okay, they're at 25% health, auto attack again, okay, they're at 50% health. Like, you very rarely throw more than 5 autos at somebody. So, like, you know, I could see someone making an argument, but what if they have Shen? What if they have Malachi? That Conquer is going to help. I mean, maybe you can run it in those types of situations. But in general, Draven's not that great into tanks anyways, late game. So I would just go hard in the early game and just try to snowball. So how do we do this then? What are the other options available for Draven if you're not going to be able to take that? You want something that's going to give you some kind of burst or some kind of extra utility, or just something that's going to let you bully out in the laning phase. Okay? So if we look here, if it's going to let me just go to the like full page. I don't know if it is or not. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so what are our options? And lethal tempo, not really going to work that well because, you know, once again, he's going to be attacking and he wants to kill people quickly, and he needs to catch his axe most of the time before he does his next auto attack. So yeah, you can throw extra, you know, stuff in there with this, but it's not going to make your axes come down any quicker. So that's why you want to kill people in just a couple of hits, because attack speed is like okay on him, but not as great as it is on other champs because he needs to catch those axes to do a lot of his damage. Fleet footwork. Still decent. Would give him a nice heal in the laning phase. He already gets lifesteal, though, most of the time. Usually he'll rush a Bloodthirster. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second, but he doesn't need the lifesteal as much. Conquer, kind of bad now, right? You have to get 5 hits, and it only stays on you for 2 seconds. And the stacking bonus is, like, laughable, right? At low levels, you're going to gain, like, 2, maybe 3 AD per hit. It's okay, but, like, it's nowhere near what it used to be. Remember, it used to give you, like, even at fairly lower levels, if you triggered Conquer, it would give you, like, 10 plus 20% true damage on your attacks on the first hit. So that's way, way lower in power. Electrocute, you're not going to hit them with 3 things. That doesn't matter. Predator, silly, don't do that. Hail of Blades, same reason that Lethal Tempo doesn't work. I don't think Hail of Blades is going to work that well. Dark Harvest is interesting. I had initially thought maybe Dark Harvest could be okay on him because he does want to do that burst damage. It does give you that extra little bit, but it's got a really long cooldown. 45 seconds. You're not going to be able to get it every now and then. I don't know. It's okay. It does give you that little bit of burst. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough damage to matter. After kind of running the numbers there. Airy, same deal. You can do a little bit of extra damage there, right? So every time you auto-attack, you're going to be hitting them for, like, maybe 15. So that does add up over time if you're landing a lot of extra autos. It's just it's completely trash late game, right? It's just not going to do that much for you. So it's okay. It'll give you a little bit of advantage. I know that Draven used to run Airy in the past. The problem is a lot of this stuff has been nerfed over time, and most of it's just not going to be good as a primary tree for Draven to run this, right? Like, what are you going to get out of this tree? Nullifying Orb? I guess you can get Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. So there is good stuff there. There's Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm, I guess. This tree is pretty anemic, and Airy itself is pretty anemic. Arcane Comic, no. Phase Rush, no. Grasp, you don't want to go defensive on Draven. You want to kill people. Probably not Aftershock or Guardian either, so those are all out. However, once we get down to Inspiration, this is kind of interesting. Glacial Augment could slow people down so that you could do a lot of extra damage. You're not going to get any slowing items, though. So, you could try something like a Blade of the Ruined King. That just sounds terrible. I wouldn't do that. Kleptomancy, however, now this is interesting. And I didn't come up with this all on my own. People have been testing this out on Draven for a while, and there are, like, occasionally some pro players that are trying this out. I think Han Sama recently did this. So some people are kind of experimenting with it. Like, here's a Han Sama game with it. Most people are still doing Conquer, but once again, I think they're just forcing it. I really don't think Conquer is that great right now on him. I think people are just really slow to adapt. But you might say, well, that sounds really weird. Why would you go Klepto on Draven? Well, he has 2 really cheap ways that he can proc it that are on, like, a very, very low cooldown. So if you look at his ability here, Blood Rush, it's only 40 mana, and it has no cooldown, basically, right? So whenever you press this, you gain extra bonus movement speed and attack speed. So you can just run up to him with Blood Rush, auto-attack him. That does trigger Klepto. If you turn on Blood Rush and then auto, that's a Klepto. So it triggers Klepto, and then as soon as you catch an axe, it resets. So it's always up, and it's only 40 mana. And if you get, usually you get Blood Rush second, so you'll get a couple of points in that for the laning phase, probably. And so you can get that down to like 35 or maybe even 30 mana. Good kitty. 35, maybe even 30 mana. And it gives you a lot of extra gold. So it gives you potions, so you can be even more aggressive in the laning phase. It gives you some of those like active flask things that can give you extra AD or extra on-hit damage. There's a lot of little items you can get off of that reward you for being aggressive, right? So you can get the Sly Sacks of Gold, obviously. You can get some wards to help protect you, help out your support. Mana potions, health potions, that can help out a lot. And then you can get like the travel size, Elixir of Sorcery, Iron, Wrath. All of those can be, decent type of pickups there. And so it's just really easy to stack up a lot of extra gold with him. And because you are so lane dominant, people are not going to step up to you most of the time. You're going to get those free hits on him. And so it really rewards you for being aggressive on something that's pretty cheap that you can spam. And you're going to be getting the mana off of the mana potions. You can take biscuits with this as well, which will help you out with your mana early on. It'll help you out with your health as well. You get free footwear, so that's like a 350 gold value right there, so you don't have to stop and get boots. You can just go straight into your Bloodthirster. And then I really don't know. I guess you just take Cosmic Insight. This is a little bit less exciting, but it does reduce the cooldown of your flash, which is going to be really good on Draven, obviously, because you love to flash and get those last hits when people are trying to run away. And then, so you got Summoner Spell. The cooldown reduction's like, it's all right. You don't really have cooldown problems anyways, but it'll let you use your ult a little bit more. And then I don't know what kind of item you could get that would have an active on it. It's probably not going to get a lot of value out of that. So not a ton of value to be had there. It's okay. I guess you could take Time Warp Tonic, which can help you out in all-ins for sure. So that could be pretty decent for all-ins if you want to do Time Warp Tonic. It also gives you a little bit of bonus movement speed in fights, which is handy. You know, you get about an extra 18 movement speed whenever you, like, pop a biscuit or a potion or something. So, you know, maybe Time Warp, maybe Cosmic. The main attraction here is that, you know, you don't even have to hit skill shots with it, right? It's not like it's Ezreal. You just literally just either turn on your axes, also trigger it, which are also very cheap. So anytime you turn on an axe for 45 mana, that can trigger it. Or Blood Rush for 40 mana with no cooldown can trigger it. So you can just constantly, anytime you want to auto attack, it's a guaranteed money in the bank whenever you land that auto. So I think that's really nice. It also doubles down on just him getting a ton of gold and just snowballing out of control, because he snowballs so hard off of Bloodthirster, off of that raw AD that you get. So I think now you want to go Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, and then probably just Phantom Dancer, and then just run at people and just blow them up, just nuke them. So yeah, you are losing some power off of Conquer, but you know, old Conquer is probably better than Klepto, which is why most people got it over Klepto. But you know, we don't want to live in the past, right? It's just not as good as it once was. I think it's really trash on him right now, Conquer, and so you have to have something. So I think this is the next best thing. It does eat into your damage a little bit, but it does allow you to take more trades, heal through it, get a lot of extra gold, hit your power spike faster than other people do. So I think that can be really, really strong. So that's what I would run on Draven, and I still think he's going to be really good, even without the Conquer. He still does a bazillion damage. He still scales up really hard. Don't forget that, like, basically every auto attack counts as a crit, pretty much, because he gets even more than that. He gets 55 bonus damage with an extra 150% bonus AD on each auto. Now, with Critical Strike, remember that Critical Strike, this bonus damage, cannot crit, but it does lifesteal, and that's why everybody gets lifesteal on Draven, is because he gets a tremendous amount of value out of it because of these axes. So that's, if you ever wondered, why does Draven always get lifesteal? And why did no other champions get Bloodthirster first except for Draven? That's why. It's because the spinning axe is lifesteal, but they don't crit. So Critical Strike is still really good because, you know, your normal attack can crit, and then you get all this extra bonus damage on top of that. So that's good. But the Bloodthirster is so strong. So you definitely want to take Overheal on Draven. I think Overheal Alacrity is where I would go second. You can do like Gathering Storm, Absolute Focus if you want to, but Overheal is just overpowered as hell on Draven with the Bloodthirster, because you get such an insane shield. And when you get this shield plus the Phantom Dancer potential shield, plus just your natural lifesteal, it's almost impossible to burst you out. Plus the Bloodthirster shield. So you get the Bloodthirster shield itself, then you get the Overheal shield on top of that, so you're going to have like a 400 shield to begin with, and then if they get you low enough by some miracle, then Phantom Dancer is going to shield you for like another 300, so you get like, you know, almost 50% extra health off of all these ridiculous shields. Not to mention if you have a Nami or a Sona also healing and shielding you. So I think that Draven's still in a really good spot. If you're a very good Draven, he could still be #1, especially if Lucian's banned. You know, I could definitely see picking Draven over Jinx. But I think this is going to be the new hotness. It'll take people a little while to adapt to this, but this is, you know, I didn't come up with this once again. Hans Sama did it recently, and this is an old school thing. This is like a Philo special last year. So it was Troll last year because Conquer was so good, there's no way you could take anything else. But now I think it could be for real because Conquer is so bad, you really don't want it. So yeah, just Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer. I think that's the way to go. You could get something like a Rapid Fire Cannon in here somewhere, but I would just go for the big hits. Just kill them in 2 hits, get it over with. You know, that's how Draven rolls. So that's the most powerful builds that I see. And that's, you know, he's still going to be very strong. Okay, Vayne. Vayne is coming up a lot. Now, you know, I have been a hater of Vayne in the past because I don't think, like, Vayne is a champion where either she's really overpowered in a meta or she's worthless in a meta. There's really not much in between where it's like, well, Vayne's an okay option, you know. This is one of those types of meta where she's like erring towards overpowered, but this is like one of the more balanced states I've seen her in. But she's still very, very strong. So what is it about Vayne? Why is Vayne coming up recently? Well, #1, they buffed out Final Hour here. So now, you know, a while ago they made it to where you can extend the duration for an extra 3 seconds for a really long time when you're auto attacking. So that's something that they did last year, but then more recently, they made it to where your tumble has a 50% cooldown. So that means that you get to go invisible like every second or so, and that gives you all of this extra damage. So it's not just the invisibility. It's like, no, every time you auto attack, you're going to be doing an extra 70% total attack damage as well on that. So that's really powerful. They also buffed this. I think this used to only go to like 11 or 12% total damage. I mean, we can just look at it here. Got the history. I'm just sitting here speculating. Not speculating. I just don't have the exact timeline. Okay, so 9.1 was when they added the 50% reduction there. Tumble, they lowered the cooldown by quite a bit, especially at early levels. At 8.18, 8.14, they took it from 12% to 14%. So those are really the major changes over the last, half a year or so. They have slowly edged her up. They've also nerfed out a lot of the other early game type of interactions that can punish her in the laning phase, and they've buffed a lot of the healing interactions in the laning phase. So, they've nerfed out Dark Harvest. She was terrible. She could not use Dark Harvest herself. And so when you just had Jhin and Misfortune and these other, like Zyra and Brand and all these champions, and they're just beating her down with Dark Harvest in the preseason, it's not going to work out very well for her. But they nerfed Dark Harvest, they nerfed Brand, they nerfed Zyra, they nerfed Jhin in several different ways, including taking away his coveted Hail of Blades interaction. They buffed up Enchanters, and she loves Enchanters because she scales so hard, and she just needs somebody just to help her out with some heals, just put up a little bit of pressure in the laning phase. So like Nami and her, it's like cookies and cream, man. They work so well together because she's got the heal, and then Nami gives her that mobility, much like Lucian, to allow her to maneuver around, dodge skill shots, and stick to people. And that's really Vayne's style. Is she's a sustained damage champion. She's not burst, although she does really high damage later on. But that has really made her a lot stronger. The buff to champions like Nami, to a lesser extent like Sona, have really brought her back into the limelight. And now that tanks might start coming back into the meta, potentially, once again, there could be a delayed effect on this because people in solo queue may not do it until they see pros do it. But we might see more things like Shen, like Malachi, still going to see Sion. And then we already have stuff like Nunu that's becoming really popular, who's very tanky, very difficult to kill. And we might see some more tanks, coming into play there. So she's very, very good against tanks because these silver bolts are true maximum health, true damage. And then also the Blade of the Ruined King that she gets also does percentage of current health. So she just absolutely mows through tanks. And there's also a relatively new build that people have been getting on her as well. It's kind of standard now, but it was pretty revolutionary when it came out, which was the Blade of the Ruined King into Gensu's. And that has really only worked since they changed Gensu's around. So they basically, Gensu's gives you armor pen right now and gives you a decent amount of attack speed, but the more important thing is they lower the cost of it quite a bit. I think it's 3,100, so it was 3,000 at one point, but 3,100 is still pretty cheap for another big ticket item, and it's very cost efficient. It goes all the way up to 125% efficiency. Now you're not getting anything out of the ability power here, so that's not really giving you that much. So you can take away 500 something out of this, but it also does not include the Last Whisper stat, I don't believe, in this evaluation. So yeah, it doesn't include Last Whisper, which is really nice. So that gives you even more penetration. So yeah, that doesn't work with your Silver Bolts, but it does work with the on-hit damage of Blade of the Ruined King. Allows it to do even more damage. But the big one is this Phantom hit, which is not calculated in here either. So that means that every second attack triggers the Silver Bolts. Because this does work with Silver Bolts, it also works with Blade of the Ruined King. So, she's getting 3 hits of Blade of the Ruined King every 2 attacks, and she's triggering her Silver Bolts every 2 attacks instead of every 3 attacks. So it's basically dealing 30% more damage. So that's really where she comes online and starts taking over the game. It's like when she gets that Blade of the Ruined King plus Gensu's, mows down everybody, just completely obliterates Barons, Dragons, 5,000 health Cho'Gaths, anything you put in front of her. As long as she doesn't get bursted out immediately, she's going to take them down. So that's why I think that Vayne's going to continue to be strong. She is questionable in the laning phase, but there are a lot of options you can get that can help you out. So you can take Taste of Blood and Ultimate Hunter, which is what some people have done. You have the healing from Sona and, or Nami or Soraka. Those type of champions can help you out early. Blade of the Ruined King. The lifesteal off of that can help you out early. You can even go for like a Hail of Blades build, which I've seen as well, where you can get Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter to help you out with the healing. But all of this is pretty big game. Now, I do see press the attack on her most of the time, but there is definitely not a consensus on what to get on Vayne at sort of like really high levels of play. And some of that might depend on your matchups and what you need. But I think that most people are doing press the attack. Now, one thing to note about press the attack that a lot of people will overlook as well is it does not apply to true damage. And this is why historically I haven't been a fan of press the attack on her, because it says right there, except true damage, the last little phrase in the first long paragraph there. So the 8 to 10, 12% bonus damage does not apply to her silver bolts. It does apply to Blade of the Ruined King, though. It does apply to the on-hit damage from Gensu's. It does apply to just the normal damage her auto attacks do. So it still applies to a lot of stuff that she has going on. And it also gives her some burst damage. So it gives her that, 40 to 80 burst, which really helps her out if she does get into a fight in the laning phase. So then at least you have something you can do early game, right? So if you manage to pin them into a wall and get a couple of autos, you've got that burst damage from press the attack, and you have the burst damage from your silver bolts. So that allows you to be a bit more competitive in the laning phase. And it also gives your team that buff. So just having someone on your team that can trigger press the attack pretty easily is really nice overall for your teammates as well, especially when they're taking down tanks. Now, I kind of joke that she'd chew through that 5,000 health Cho'Gath. She will eventually, for sure. But at the same time, it helps if your other team can chip, if the rest of your teammates can chip in too, right? And so that's where the press the attack comes in to help out. But I think it's mostly because it's a relatively short cooldown ability. It's only 6 seconds, like we talked about with Lucian, and it gives you some burst damage so that you have some way to defend yourself in the laning phase. Other options you could do would be something like Lethal Tempo, where whenever you go in and start fighting, you gain a whole lot of extra attack speed for like indefinite amount of time, basically. So Lethal Tempo can be pretty legit as well. It's just not going to do anything in the early game. And I think the thought process is she's already going to be unstoppable when you get to 2 items, so you really want to try to get something for the early game instead of that. Another option some people get is Fleet Footwork. If it's a pretty tough lane, you could just go for the like the old school Cassidon type of build where you just get a bazillion lifesteal and just, pray your way through it. Just take a Doran's Blade, take Fleet Footwork, and then, go through here, take Overheal, and then grab Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. And just tell your support to pick Nami or Sona, and just have, 5 heals to make it through the lane against Draven or Jhin or something like that. So you do have an option where you can just have, insane sustain in the laning phase to get through tough matchups like that. Conquer, don't even think about it. Garbage. Don't get this on her. It takes way too long to stack up. It seems cool and everything. It's like, oh, man, I could get some extra, Spell Vamp and Lifesteal. The thing is, you're going to be dead before you trigger it, probably. So it just takes way too long to come online. The other thing, Hail of Blades is interesting on her because her Q counts as an auto attack reset. And if you read that little line there that they added in a few patches ago, each basic attack refreshes the duration. Attack resets do not consume a stack of Hail of Blades. That's the important thing. So it's that second sentence there. So what that means is you can auto attack Tumble. So the first auto attack is going to consume one of these charges. Tumble, auto attack again, does not consume a charge. Okay? Auto attack again. All right? Tumble, auto attack again, does not consume a charge, and then auto attack again. Okay? So basically you can get, comfortably get 4, and you might even be able to squeeze out 5 or 6 auto attacks off of this, especially when you have your ult going, because remember that cut the cooldown on your Tumble by 50%, so your Tumble's really going to be like a 1-second cooldown. So you could pretty easily squeeze in, 5 auto attacks off of Hail of Blades, and it does give you a lot of extra attack speed. So it's just like bam, Tumble, bam, bam, Tumble, bam, bam. It's a lot of hits in there. But you can only do that against one person, once in a team fight most of the time. So it's pretty good for dueling, but you have to be out of combat for 4 seconds before you can do it again. So it's okay, but this also would allow you to go Taste of Blood and either Ultimate Hunter or Ravenous Hunter second. You're kind of stuck with Eyeball Collection after that, which does stack up and gives you quite a bit late game, but it takes a while to come online. So that's why some people are doing that. This is one thing I predicted on Vayne back when they made that adjustment to Hail of Blades, where the auto attack resets don't consume a charge. I said, well, that might be great for Vayne. And it turns out a lot of people are kind of adopting that. But, you know, a lot of people are still doing press the attack too. So, you know, it's kind of up to you. You can kind of figure out what you think might work. That does give you access to both of the lifesteals if you want that early on. So maybe for like a tough lane, that might be something that you'd want to take. But yeah, most people are taking Taste of Blood and Ultimate Hunter as their secondary, is what I've seen lately. Just so you have more access to the ult, because your ult is so powerful. So this is kind of like your more like the standardized build that I really like, which Imp had here. Just press the attack, overheal, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, and then Taste of Blood, Ultimate Hunter. So very strong champ. Then just Blade of the Ruined King, Gensu's, and you can kind of figure it out after that. You could get a GA if you wanted to. I think Phantom Dancer is also really strong because you get that shield. You could go Infinity Edge after that. I will just say, please do not rush Infinity Edge on Vayne. I've seen some Vaynes doing that recently. It's bad. And the reason that it's bad is because your extra tumble damage cannot crit. Okay, they took this out years ago. So if you're looking at like a MOBA Fire Guild guide from like 5 years ago, you might see Critical Strike Vayne. But that was because this used to be able to crit back in the day. They took it away. It does not crit anymore, okay? So in exchange for that, they took out the crit, and that's when they added in this sort of Night Hunter thing where, you know, you can extend the duration for longer periods of time. That was sort of their compensation to where you could have this up for a really long time. But yeah, so do not take it early. You can get Infinity Edge or something like that later if you want to, but I think most of the time, most Vaynes just stick with Blade of the Ruined King, Gensu's, and then Phantom Dancer, mostly because of that shield, or you can get Quicksilver Sash, GA, some kind of defensive item. But yeah, that's what I would get on Vayne, and I do think she's very strong right now. Very good against Ezreal too, because she can actually run him down in a lot of situations if she dodges his Qs. So she's one of the few AD carries that can actually catch him and run him down if she catches him out alone. Okay, and then finally, much to the chagrin of some people on here, I'm looking at you, Jolty. I do think that Yasuo does deserve to be tier 1 up here. I mean, it's hard to ignore it. I've played with this guy a couple of times in the bot lane. He is really, really good right now. Now, he did get a nerf on this patch as well, and he's not played bot lane that much, but he's still got 55% when he is played, and it's like 1.5% like pick rate. So it's not a ton, but it's not like 0.1. Right, it's not like one guy, you know, that plays this on the server. There's like an okay chunk of people that play this. Now, Yasuo is banned all the time, but I'm just saying, if he does show up bot lane, he can be really good in a lot of matchups. That win wall really screws with AD carries. Everybody knows that. And he just scales really well, and there's just usually a lot of squishy targets down there you can kill. Right, not only does it screw with AD carries, it screws with Nami, and it screws with Sona, right, because it can eat both of their ults. And if he gets on top of either one of them, he's going to delete them. So I think that Yasuo is a pretty disgusting combo. He's just very dangerous, so you have to make sure that, you know, you don't feed with him when you're in the bot lane. He is very hard to play. So I'm not recommending that everyone go out there and play Yasuo. I'm just saying if you can play Yasuo, or if you practice him a ton, then he can actually potentially be pretty good in the bot lane. Particularly if he has someone there to help him out. You know, like Nami, for example, great support right now. Her bubble counts as a knockup. He can trigger his ult off of that. And then I'm pretty sure it does. Let me double check that just really quickly. I'm like 99% sure that it does. It's a stun and a knockup, I think. And then her wave also has a knockup component to it. And she can put the E on him to allow him to stick to people a lot easier. And then, of course, the heal is tremendous as well. Suspending them. Airborne. Yep. So a lot of people forget that about this, but her bubble does actually suspend people in the air. It does count as airborne. It does trigger Yasuo. So once again, Nami, phenomenal with Yasuo in the bot lane. So yeah, I think he still has to go Conquer, even though I got nerfed a lot, and that kind of sucks. He can trigger it up fairly quickly because both his auto attacks and his W and his Q can trigger it, and all of them are like really low cooldown. And not his W, maybe his E, his little thing where he dashes through stuff, can trigger it. And then I think just going something like Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter is the way to go. Just even more sustain in the laning phase. Take the overheal You know, get yourself a Nami on your team, and you'll probably be able to slaughter that, you know, Jinx Sona on the other end or whatever. So he can be very good, super high skill cap, but he can definitely work down there. I do think that Infinity Edge, obviously, something you want to get. You could even rush it. I would probably rush Infinity Edge. And then Static Shiv does give you a lot more wave clear, gives you a lot more burst damage. You could also go Phantom Dancer if you want a little bit more protection. But if you go Phantom Dancer, then you don't go Sterix, because don't forget the lifeline does not overlap. So do not get Phantom Dancer plus Sterix ever on any champion, because the unique thing, the shield, overlaps for both items. It's like getting a Sheen when you already have a Trinity Force. Doesn't work. Okay, so don't ever get Phantom Dancer plus Sterix. So your basic options here, what a lot of people do is they'll do Infinity Static and then Sterix. But I think there could be an argument made for Infinity Phantom Bloodthirster as well. That'll give you a lot more AD. It'll give you less health, but it'll make you hit like a truck, and then you'll have a really big shield to help protect you as well. You'll have the double shield, right? So you'll have the Bloodthirster shield and the Phantom Dancer shield, and the shield off of your overheal. So I think that's a good combination. You get way, way, way more AD, because remember, Bloodthirster has 80 AD on it. Versus like this build here, Sterix is probably going to give you like 40 AD or so in value. And then, you know, Static Shiv is not going to give you a ton. It does give you wave clear, though, which does help out a lot. So just it kind of depends. Like, this is going to be like more raw health, and you get the stats and things off of Sterix and wave clear. But then the Phantom Dancer Bloodthirster, I think, is going to be higher single target damage and probably more more survivability in smaller fights. So that's Yasuo, very strong. I know a lot of people hate him, but let's just be honest. He can be very good in the bot lane if you're good on him. Okay. Going down to tier 2 here, and we're going to have to go through these a lot faster because I don't want this tier list to be too long, but as always, I want to be thorough, especially with the top 5 picks. Ezreal, so if this is Pro Player Challenger, Ezreal's number 1, and he probably, I don't know, it's hard not to put him in tier 1, but the honest truth is so many Ezreals are so bad on him. That's the issue, and it's not just me, it's just not my subjective experience, although anyone that's watched the stream can probably vouch for that. It's, you know, he's the 3rd lowest win rate AD carry right now. He's only 48%, and win rate doesn't mean everything, but on a champion that honestly is this overpowered, he really is. If you're good on him, he's ridiculous, right? Like, he gets a lot of extra gold to accelerate his build. You can't really pressure him out of lane because he's going to have a lot of potions, and he can just last hit from like a million miles away. So even if his support goes to roam, it's really hard to punish him for that. It's hard to push into him because he can wave clear with his ult. He can last hit really easily under tower with his Q. And then once he gets a couple of items and he just sits in the back and just spams those Q on people, he's going to hit some eventually. And then like near the late game, especially when he gets that double tier item, he almost one-shots people. Just the W plus Q. You know, it's like 80% of your health. And it's like, well, how the hell do you fight that? You know, when you siege him. Because you can't get to him because he's standing like 1,200 units away spamming those Qs on you. You can't really hit him with anything. He pretty much has a flash that's on like a 2-second cooldown late game. He can snipe you out with his ult. He just has so much utility. If he gets Iceborne Gauntlet, it's hard to chase anyone on his team because he's just constantly applying those slows to you over and over and over again. So not only is he going to probably keep hitting you once he hits you with one Q, because it's going to be really hard for you to dodge the next Q because you're slowed, but you can't run down anybody. Not only can you not get him, but he can kite for his allies with that too. So he's just super annoying. He's probably one of the most tilting champions in League of Legends. You know I personally suffer the most cognitive dissonance with him, so it feels like every Ezreal on my team is terrible, everyone on the enemy team is a god. And statistically, I know that can't be true, but that's just how it works. So if you're godlike on Ezreal, he is one of the best do-it-yourself hard carry champs. So, you know, if you dropped off like Double Lift or somebody in bronze, like Ezreal would probably be on the short list of champions he would want to play. You know, like Draven would be there too, Vayne would be there. But, you know, he can peel for himself, so even if your support's brain dead or just doesn't help you out, doesn't matter. You know, you can just farm up and you will eventually be unstoppable near the end of the game. So he does have a notoriously weak early game, so he can be punished hard by a really aggressive Lucian, Nami, you you know, really anyone that was up there, like, in the tier 1 can punish him out first. He's pretty good against Yasuo for the most part, but even Vayne can punish him in lane. So you're handing over a free lane to a champion that probably will outscale. Like, using the word scaling is actually really hard with Ezreal, because just in a normal fight where he's sitting there, like, trying to do sustained damage, you know, someone like Vayne is going to blow him out of the water, or Jinx, you know, auto-attacking in team fights. But his scaling comes in the form of poking, and just, like, how difficult it is to just avoid his damage. He's just constantly throwing those Qs at you, and eventually it's going to add up. And he can all-in burst you. He's just not great at, like, team fights where, you know, everyone's just getting melted by the Jinx or by the Vayne or whatever, especially if they're able to dodge your Qs. Now, he's not phenomenal against tanks either. He's okay because he can kite them, but he's not going to blow them up fast enough. So if you're having a proper 5v5 and, you know, their front line has a Malachi protecting a Jinx, and Jinx is just sitting there, like, free-firing on your team, or Vayne is just sitting on that back line free-firing against your Scion who's on the front line, and they have a Malachi who's on the front line tying everyone up, you're going to lose because you're not going to do enough damage to that Malachi, right? You're not going to kill the Malachi before the Vayne kills your Scion, right? And so that's the thing, is, like, he does not go through the front line as well as some of these other hyper carries, so he's not going to be able to break those team fights open like that. But, you know, he does have the poke, he does have the safety, so he still deserves a top spot, even though I hate going against him. He is really fun to play. I like playing him. He's great. He's one of my favorite AD carries to play, but I rage a lot about Ezreal's on my stream. Well, I think rage is probably a strong word, but I get definitely perturbed about the Ezreals on my team in streams. So, and I actually went back and looked at some of my recent matches too. I'm like, am I just crazy or what? I actually do win with Vayne a lot on my team. For as much crap as I have given Vayne historically, I actually have been winning a lot with Vaynes on my team, but not with Ezreals. So, like, the Vayne cognitive dissonance is definitely an illusion. Vayne is really good right now. Ezreal seems to have some basis in empirical reality, at least when he's on my team in recent days. But anyways, okay, so Ezreal, very good. Most people know the build on him. I like the Iceborne Gauntlet over Trinity. Gives you more utility. Gives you that safety, you know, against things like Zed or Hecarim that are going to be running at you potentially on this patch. You can even get things like Ninja Tabby, Iceborne Gauntlet, and then you'll have the shield from Archangels. So you have a lot of protection compared to most other AD carries. Like, you're right up there with Lucian in terms of being able to get some defensive items to help you out against assassins. And that's another thing that makes him really valuable, is his the defensive stuff he can get in addition to his high mobility and his potential to kite. Okay. So Twitch is going to be another one who's really far up here. Twitch could be in tier 1. The problem is, like, he doesn't really have an amazing rune on him. It's okay. Like, you go Lethal Tempo is okay. Now, you need to get crit. Okay, you need to get crit on Twitch. Now, a lot of people are still going to be getting Blade of the Ruined King. It's cute. It has a nice interaction with Hurricane. But remember that his ult can crit as well. And you need the crit. You need the burst as Twitch. You know, your game when you're playing Twitch should not be, oh, I want to sit around and just out-sustain him. You know, I just want this Blade of the Ruined King to pull me through this fight. It's like, no. You want to show up invisible, pop out, go hi, and, like, pop on your ult and just delete the enemy team. That's what you want. You want them dead in 5 seconds or less while your ult's ticking. Okay? So get Critical Strike on Twitch. Okay? Do not go for Blade of the Ruined King anymore. If it's an extremely difficult lane, right? If it's like the enemy has Draven, Zyra, or something, okay, maybe you can go Blade and get Doran's Shield. You know, maybe that's what you have to do. But I think that if you have any sort of balance in the laning phase, if it's anywhere close to 50-50, especially if you have a healer on your team, if you have a Soraka, a Nami, a Sona, something like that, someone who can heal you through the laning phase, do not get Blade. You won't need the healing off of Vamp Scepter in the laning phase, and you're going to have a lot more damage. Trust me. When you get to level 6, if you have Infinity Edge, you are going to delete people when you pop out of invisibility, and that's exactly what you want. So, please, get the Infinity Edge, get Hurricane, and then after that, it's up to you. You know, Phantom Dancer, Static Shiv, whatever is fine. Now, he has a lot of interactions with Hurricane, kind of like Jinx that I mentioned before, so I thought he was going to be a bit higher than he is right now. He does have a really good win rate overall, you know. He's like whatever, the 6th highest win rate, 5th highest real champion. I don't count Mordekaiser because there's like one guy on the server that plays him. It's like 0.1 pick rate. But he is still really good. He's like in that same category with some of these other champions up here. But I think it's just he can get bullied out by pretty much everyone in the early game. So he does have that invisibility. He can creep up, you know, and get his way back into the game with the assassinations, but it can take some time. So Ruinant's Hurricane, if you didn't know, it does apply poison to everybody whenever he does that, which sets up really well for the extra damage. It does potentially apply Blade of the Ruined King to everybody, but it can also crit everybody off of Infinity Edge, and I think you want the crit rather than the Vayne, or rather than the Blade of the Ruined King. Called it a Vayne just because Vayne gets Blade of the Ruined King all the time. But particularly if they have squishies. If they have like 3 tanks on their team, okay, maybe Blade of the Ruined King. But, like, in most metas, still, you're only going to have, like, maybe one big tank up top. Maybe you're against a tank support or something. But I just think that you need the crit. Crit is also very good against tanks as well. And squishies. So that's what I would get on him. Hurricane, Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, very good. If you're good on Twitch, especially if you have a healer in the laning phase, he can be awesome. Particularly if they don't have a lot of dive or CC. If you have a good front line and they're just going to, like, you know, block for you while you do your thing and just like spray and pray and delete the whole team, he's going to be fantastic. So Twitch still good. I think Karthus is really good. People haven't been playing him as much in the bot lane. He did get a nerf to his Q. I don't think it matters. I still think he's going to scale through the roof. He can always press R later on in the game. He's a good source of magic damage if the rest of your team is doing AD. So if you have like, you know, Hecarim in the jungle and then Riven top lane, Zed middle, or whatever, you want an AP option bottom, I think Karthus is probably the best one right now. Yeah, good wave clear, great scaling, decent utility with his wall, takes dragons really quickly, takes barons quickly. He can go in there and start farming the jungle on the side. You know, if your jungler is just spending all day ganking and they're not grabbing their golems, you can grab the golems, you can grab bottom scuttle or whatever. So I think he's got a lot of utility out there. Yeah, Ardent Censor's not great with him, and Enchanters are very strong right now, but there are a really popular Enchanter build that I think is very strong right now. It's just going Athenes into Redemption. Then it's maybe not even going Ardent or going Ardent like really late in the game. And so then it doesn't even matter if you can't use Ardent that well. You know, Redemption and Unholy Grail are still going to be pretty strong on you. Okay, Ashe is the next one that I'll talk about just really briefly here. I think Ashe has gone up a lot. I wanted to put her higher in tier 2, but she's still not that mobile, and the thing is she doesn't have a lot of burst damage in the laning phase, so I just don't know if she's going to be able to punish things like Vayne and Lucian enough to hold him down, and Jinx, and I think those champions will still outscale her potentially, but she does have really nice utility. She can track the jungler really well with her Hawk Shot. And I just did a guide on Ashe last week, so be sure to check that out. But get Critical Strike on Ashe, okay? Crit. Not Blade of the Ruined King. Crit. Okay, I did the math in the guide. Off of first item against a single target, you're going to be getting about, I think it was like, you're doing 80 extra damage or something off of Infinity Edge. I think it was like a total of like 180 damage. Let me just pull this up here real quick. I don't know if I have it pulled up or not. I'm just going to blank screen this just really quickly. Just pull up the guide so I can give you the exact numbers here. Champ Guide, Season 9, Ashe. Okay. So I did the math here for you. Okay, so when you get an Infinity Edge, first of all, Blade of the Ruined King is 89% gold efficient. Not including the passive. Obviously, a lot of the value comes out of the passive. Infinity Edge is 112% efficient. You gain 182 damage per hit when you get Infinity Edge. And the reason for this that everybody forgets about Ashe is that Critical Strike turns into, every 1% of Critical Strike turns into 1% extra damage on auto attack. Okay? So if you have 25% crit, that means you're doing 25% more damage on your autos. Right? So that's total AD, including your base AD that you start with. If you have Infinity Edge itself, you gain an extra modifier of 25% extra damage. That's a lot. That's a huge modifier. So Infinity Edge itself is going to give you 25% crit. That's 25% extra damage. And it has that special modifier of an additional 25%. So that means you're doing 50% extra damage per hit. Okay? In addition to that, it has 80 AD on it. You know what works really well with doing a lot of extra percentage damage? Having a larger number. So having more AD is really good. Blade of the Ruined King, I believe only has 40 AD on it, right? Yeah, 84 per hit. It's got 40 AD on it, I'm pretty sure. And so it's just astronomical. You're doing almost double damage against a single target. Just watch that video if you want me to break it down more. I don't want to, go too far into this, but pretty much you're going to have more scaling as well because the 25%, the more AD that you get in your build, the 25% crit and the 25% modifier are going to increase the rest of it. So if you want to get something like Essence Reaver down the line, or just anything that's going to give you more AD, or just the AD that you get as you level up, if you get an Infernal Dragon, you get Baron, whatever, you get extra AD, having that modifier off of Infinity Edge is going to give you a lot more damage. And so it just scales way, way better than Blade of the Ruined King does. You have the option of potentially getting triple crit on your slows, which is going to super slow people down. Your W does a lot more damage. So with Ashe, your W doesn't trigger Blade of the Ruined King, but it scales off of AD, and that's a lot of your poke damage, particularly later on in the game. Now, the reason that, and remember that her Ranger's Focus does not trigger, each one of these little shards does not trigger Blade of the Ruined King. It only triggers once per attack. Because it says here, on hit effects only trigger once. So then you might ask, well, why do people get Blade of the Ruined King? The reason is because of Hurricane. Each one of the Hurricane bolts can trigger Blade. So if you have 3 enemies stacked up close together, then it is going to deal more damage to all of those people, right? So in a team fight where everybody's stacked up, yes, it does more damage. And that's why in professional play and in challenger level play, where it's really tightly organized and there are a lot of these team fights where people are grouped up, then Blade of the Ruined King is going to be stronger. It's also a lower gold economy. So in those types of games, you're probably only going to be able to get like 2 items. You're going to be able to get Blade and Hurricane, and that's probably it. Maybe one more item, right? But in solo queue, you're going to get more items than that. You're going to get 3, probably 4 items in some games. And so you want to come in, you want to beat people up immediately with Infinity Edge. You want to do maximum damage to single targets while you're still in the landing phase. And there's a lot more skirmishing in solo queue, right? Not everyone's going to be grouped up having organized team fights. You're going to have random person over here, farming golems or something. Someone else is trying to split push. And then, just the fights, these little like 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 or like 3-on-2 fights are going to break out all across the map. And so you're not going to have as high a level organized play. So against a single target, you're just trying to fight one other person, even 2 other people. I don't think it's going to do as much damage with Hurricane plus Blade of the Ruined King. Now keep in mind, as I said with Twitch and as I said with Jinx, those Hurricane bolts can crit too. So you're not really losing a ton of value off of that. Actually, I think with Ashe, that was kind of an open question I wasn't sure about because I know she can't crit in general. I'm pretty sure they don't trigger this ability, but I don't know if those bolts can crit for extra damage or if it's just Ashe that can't crit. But either way, you want the Infinity Edge, trust me. So I think the really good build on her is going to be Infinity Edge, Hurricane, Essence Reaver. Okay, because this is going to give you 3 crit items and a ton of AD, and that's exactly what you want to do maximum damage to single targets. Okay, it's also going to help you bust tanks a lot faster than Blade of the Ruined King will, or than Hurricane will. You can get Blade of the Ruined King later if you want. Like you could go Infinity, then Hurricane, then Blade if you want to do that. A lot of people will go Blade, Hurricane, Infinity, but I would just rather have that power spike of 50% more damage to single targets. And that's going to be so much better against the squishies you're fighting in the laning phase, against other ADs, against squishy junglers, against enchanters, supports. All that stuff, that crit is just going to blow them away, okay? And that's going to do way, way more, I think, in the early game than Blade. For most solo queue players, unless you're Challenger or Pro. So I think Ashe can be good, particularly if people get the correct build on her. And then finally, Cassiopeia. I still think she's pretty good. She has been nerfed out. Her win rate has fallen down a little bit, but she can put out high sustained damage early. She's got great utility with her miasma and her ultimate. You do have to go tier now, which does slow you down a little bit. So you just end up going Archangels. You don't have to go double mana. You don't have to go Rod plus Archangels, but I think you have to get at least Archangels now instead of Ludens, which, does slow you down a little bit in terms of power, but I still think she's going to be really strong, particularly once again if you have triple AD elsewhere, right? You have AD jungler, AD mid laner, AD top laner, decent option. I think Karthus is probably a little bit better now, but I think Cassio is another, you know, slightly off meta pick that can still work in the bot lane. One hit to Cassiopeia in the bot lane versus mid lane is that she scales really hard based on levels, and the fact that you are splitting experience with the support, you know, is kind of some anti-synergy with how her kit works. But at the same time, you also get protection, and she's very vulnerable while she's trying to level up as well. So you get the protection of something like a Nami or, you know, like a Sona or whatever. You get the healing as well. You get the warding, but your levels do slow down a little bit. Okay. And finally, the last crew here that I'll go through, we have Kai'Sa. Now, Kai'Sa has fallen down quite a bit. And one of the major reasons is there's just not a really good Gensu's build out there with her right now. So everyone else is benefiting like really hard off of rushing Infinity Edge. And beforehand, the fact that she could get Stormrazor when everyone else was getting Stormrazor kind of set up an even playing ground. It's like everybody's getting this trash item that you have to get, so you have a first item power spike, and then they start doing their real build after that, right? So nothing else has really good synergy with that item. So she didn't really lose out on it that much. But now that so many people are rushing Infinity Edge, and she can't rush that, then she is starting a step behind. Or she can, and that's actually what I do recommend, is what I want to say. But she can't get Gensu's, is what I meant to say, because it has like no synergy with Infinity Edge. That's what a lot of people are trying to force. I think people are living in the past with Kai'Sa, kind of like, you know, I said they're living in the past with Draven. I think they're still trying to force these old builds. But ultimately, I think it's going to be pretty weak a lot of the time. As I speculated, my last 80 carry tier list, I think that the best build on her is going to be Infinity Edge, Hurricane, something like Phantom Dancer. And just forget the Gensu's. But everybody wants Gensu's on her. That's the really cool interaction. You know, it does stack up her passive faster, which is nice. It does give her attack speed. You know, gives her magic pin, gives her armor pin. Like, it is a very, very good item on her. It's just, it doesn't have any synergy with anything. So, you know, you can get something like, another option would be Death's Dance, and I mentioned this before, so you're not going to have the critical strike, but if you're not going to be getting items that have crit anyways, if you're getting Gensu's instead, I mean, maybe you might as well just go Death's Dance and get that extra sustain in there, the extra survivability. But I think that, you know, a lot of people, now, which order did he get this in? Was it Infinity and then Gensu's? Yeah, this is what a lot of people are doing, and like the reason that you have to get something like Infinity first and not Gensu's is you need your Q evolved. Your Q evolved does a lot more damage, and this is also why you can't get Blade the Ruined King most of the time, because you might think, well, why not just get Blade the Ruined King? That's awesome. That's like Vayne 2.0, right? You get to stack up your passive, you know, this like huge burst damage. You have, you know, Gensu's triggering Blade the Ruined King twice. I mean, it's great. You know, Varus does it, Vayne does it. Why can't Kai'Sa do it? The reason is you won't get to the amount of AD that you need to evolve your Q, and I don't think you'll get to the attack speed to evolve your E either, so you're going to have two items without any evolves, which feels bad. That Q basically, like the Q evolve basically makes your Q do double damage, which is a huge amount of burst damage, especially in isolated situations. So I think you get Infinity Edge first. You get your Runaan's Hurricane plus Berserker Greaves. Boom, that's your E evolve. That would evolve your Q and your E off of two items. Hurricane Bolts can crit off of Infinity Edge, so you're going to be doing some big crits. Hurricane Bolts also still spread your passive to everybody, so you still have some synergy there. It's a lot cheaper than Gensu's as well. It's a 2,600 gold item instead of 3,100, so you're hitting that power spike faster. So that's what I would do. I would go Infinity Edge Hurricane just so that you immediately get that value out of it. And then maybe Gensu's as a third item. I could see Gensu's third instead of something like Phantom Dancer. But I just feel like if you're going Infinity first and then Gensu's second, it just seems like it's really awkward because Gensu's doesn't interact with crit. That second hit off of the Phantom hit, the passive there, does not trigger crit. The second hit does not do any damage. It only triggers on-hit effects. Infinity Edge has no on-hit effects. So this is like non-synergy. You're just basically getting 25% crit, and then this interacts with your passive. And that's it. So it just feels really bad, really anti-synergistic, and I think this is part of why she has just cratered in terms of win rate, is because people are trying to build her that way at 48%, and I just don't think it's good. I think people just have to give up on the Gensu's second. And just bite the bullet, just go Hurricane. Has a lot more synergy with the critical strike that you're going to have. It's still going to allow you to spread your crit around to everybody. It's going to give you better wave clear. So that's what I think. I think that will help her out a ton if people actually start doing that. There is a build floating around, and I thought it looked tempting, but I saw some kid try it in one of my games, and he wasn't that good on Kai'Sa to begin with, but it just was not very inspiring. It was this kind of Blather and King build. And so what you do with this is basically you get Blather and King and then 2 pickaxes, and that will evolve your Q like this. And then you turn 1 pickaxe into Gensu's. So now you have the synergy of being able to evolve your Q. Then you have the Blather and King plus Gensu's build, and then you can use the second pickaxe later to complete Infinity Edge. So it seems really good. It's like, oh, sweet. Well, this solves the problem, right? You get to get your Blather and King interaction with Gensu's. You get that online early, and then later on, you don't waste the pickaxe. You can do something else with it. Seems nice, but this right here, this moment, is a real feels bad, I think. Unless you're far ahead. Maybe I just need to see more people do it. But, like, going out of your way to have this 875 is going to slow down your Gensu's a lot. So, is it worth it to go out of the way for this in order to slow down something like Infinity Edge plus Hurricane? I don't know, but this it makes your mid game really rough, but then you kind of get to come back online. He must have just been murdering people in this game, yeah, because he jumped from like Blather and King to like double pick to Gensu's. So he's in like 4 minutes. So he gained like 5,000 gold in 4 minutes or something. So this may not be a good game to judge this on, but I don't know. That's on the table. You could try that out. I haven't seen it that much. A lot of people are not doing it, as you can see, but there are some people that are kind of goofing around with it. Maybe it's for certain situations. I don't know for sure. You could test it out yourself, but my instinct is that most of the time it's not going to be as good. But yeah, that's Kai'Sa. She's okay. I still think you should rush Infinity Edge early. But, I'll leave it to y'all to decide. It's basically that Blather and King into double pick, or it's Infinity Edge into Hurricane, I think. You can do Infinity Edge into Gensu's, but that's what most people seem to be doing. I think it's really bad. But we'll see. Okay, Xayah, I think, is a lot stronger than her stats imply. I think people just are not building her right. Again, as a common trend with several of these champions, I think people are kind of living in the past with her. I think you want to just rush that Infinity Edge. And then I think Essence Reaver is really, really good on her. And, like, a lot of people just aren't getting this. I think more people are starting to get this on her. And she still has a decent win rate at high elo. Right? So she's still sitting at, like, 54%. So she's got 48% for all of us, peasants, below Challenger. But at top level, she's still pretty good. So more people are starting to get this build now. But I think people have been very slow to adopt this, especially in solo queue. So Essence Reaver just got buffed on this patch, so that'll help her out a lot. But go for those 2 big AD crit items, and then go for 1 Zeal item, kind of like what I was recommending with Ashe. And I think and this is like a good build on Sivir as well, because anything that has like abilities that do damage, you want a lot of AD. And the problem is if you go double Zeal, you're not getting any AD in your build. You're getting a lot of crit, but you're not getting AD. And so on some champions that both thrive on crit and AD, this could be very confusing for people. So like Sivir, where her boomerang bounces can crit, you want both of those, right? But then I think people just sometimes mindlessly go double Zeal instead of thinking about, wow, if I had more AD plus crit, maybe it would hit harder. And the main reason for this with Xayah is her E. Let me see if I can pull her up here real quick. I know we're basically out of time, but I do want to mention Xayah real quickly because I think that she's someone that's definitely downplayed a lot. Because of the E scaling, it has really nice bonus scaling with her E. So it has a 0.6 physical damage per feather. Now this does have diminishing returns, take from 100% down to 10%, but it ends up being a lot. So I've done the math in a past video with Xayah. Basically, this will end up being like, somewhere around I don't know, like 250 to 300% bonus AD. So that's it. It scales a ton with bonus AD. Her ult has a 100% bonus AD ratio on it. And then this, when it passes through to extra people, you know, basically has a 50% bonus AD ratio on it when you're hitting multiple people with your feathers. So that's really, really good. And then also her double daggers even has a pretty good percentage. So she really, really wants a lot of flat AD, but then she also scales on crit because this is one of the only abilities in the game that does this. The feather recall in actually does more damage based on crit. So it doesn't crit, like none of these things crit as you throw those feathers out. But when you pull them back in, that can crit. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of counterintuitive. But you're getting a lot of extra value out of crit because of that. So not only can your normal attacks crit, this does not apply on hit damage, I don't believe. 3 attacks penetrate all enemies. 100% to remain target, passive others, and a feather, blah, 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 blah. Let me see. On-hit effects are only applied to the basic attack target. So each one of these extra hits does not crit, does not apply Blade the Ruined King. It's not Twitch. Okay, Twitch is a special interaction where that works. But, you know, you can still crit when you normally hit people, but it's this Blade Caller. It's why you want AD plus crit. So that's what a lot of people have started figuring out at the pro level now. I still think that Infinity Edge might be better. This does give you a lot of wave clear when you complete Essence Reaver early. So I think this is better than it was, but either way, I think you want Essence plus Phantom plus Infinity. It's just the order kind of depends. Obviously, you get more value out of the mana early on before your mana pool is very large, and this does allow you to have more ultimates to make more plays. So that is good, but you don't get the crit modifier. Although her E does not benefit from the crit modifier, though. That's only her auto attacks. So maybe that would be an argument for going for Infinity Edge third, just because her E doesn't benefit from that passive, although her normal attacks do. I don't know. Either way, I think that it should look something like this. Infinity, Phantom, Essence Reaver. And I think people are going towards that now, instead of the double Zeal. I think the default was double Zeal for a long time, but now people are evolving, people are figuring this out. And I predict, you know, I said she should be doing this ever since last patch, but people are doing it now. I mean, people figure out stuff I don't figure out too. But I think some of these things, some of these builds are like so obvious to me for so long, and then a lot of people are just very slow to adapt it. But yeah, I would say maybe Essence, then Infinity. You can go, I think, like Phantom in the middle. I guess you are going to need some attack speed in there. So we'll go with this. I think that's a pretty good adaptation there. And then just Lethal Tempo is where you want to go. And then Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter is what I would do. Gives you a ton of extra sustain. But we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Okay, last few. We're at 1 hour and 30, so I'm just going to like blitz through these really quickly. Sivir, very good in pro play when you can, you know, highly coordinate, maximizing that mobility. Pretty bad in solo queue. Really doesn't do a lot other than push in the laning phase. She can take over late game, but she really needs to get to 3 or 4 items before that happens. She needs like triple crit. And she can get bullied out early. Now, she does have wave clear to help her out with that a little bit, but I just never see Sivir perform that well, although she does have a good win percentage. There's definitely an argument she could be up in tier 2 somewhere, probably. But I just think you're basically going for a farm off, and I don't know if you want to opt into a farm off with something like Jinx or Vayne. Maybe. She does have the really good wave clear, but she's not as great at dueling. She's not as great at these little skirmishes that sometimes break out, and she's very short range, like in an actual team fight. So you do bounce around with your Ws, but you have to get close enough to throw that W in the first place. So she's okay. She definitely can be good. I would just say in solo queue, I think there are probably better options, but she's all right. Triss is just kind of left out in the dark. She just doesn't have a good rune. Her attack range is very short early on. She has to push the wave, but yet she's not great early because her explosive shot's going to push the wave. Now, if she does get ahead, she's one of the best, like, heavy engage, like, 80 carries, which is kind of weird, like, personal engage. Obviously, Ashe is going to be the best engage, but Ashe or Varus probably, but she can, like, jump right on top of somebody's face, use those bombs, stack them up, and then jump again if they try to flash away. So she can be, like, super aggressive, which a lot of times is really dumb to do that. But if you're ahead, it's very hard to get away from her. It's hard to farm safely if she gets a kill or two on you, and she has a really aggressive support like a Leona, an Alistar, a Zyra, something like that. She can be a nightmare to try to go against. She's also very difficult to lock down because not only does she get a jump away, but she becomes unstoppable when she starts her jump, so that makes her immune to different kinds of CC. She takes towers quickly. It just takes her a long time to come online. You know, she really needs to get to like 3 items. She can go crit first. She does get a lot of attack speed with points in her Q, which is nice. But she doesn't do a lot of burst damage up front. You have to stack up the bombs with auto attacks. I don't know. It just feels like she's just takes too long and just her range is too short, and she I just feel like she just gets bullied out in the early game. Like, I'm just not scared going against her as I am like a lot of these other champions. So she's okay. She can probably be all right, but I just don't really know why you would pick her. I mean, I guess if you want hyperscaling plus a little bit more safety, maybe, but I don't know. She's all right. Jhin, finally, I think Jin's going to fall off pretty hard. He has been falling a lot statistically. The removal of Storm Razor hurts him a ton. He can go Infinity Edge early, which can be very nice on him. I think just going Infinity Edge Essence Reaver, that's what I would do with him. Just get the huge AD, huge crits, and just blow people up. Because attack speed just does not have a good conversion ratio at all. I've looked at it before, and I think that it's like it converts at like 20 gold or something value, which is just really bad because attack speed's usually like 25 or something. It's a very, very bad conversion rate. So I think that means that Zeal items are pretty trash on him. Like, you get rapid fire on him at some point, you know, you kind of have to. But I would just go for the big crit and big damage because his attack speed only levels up naturally per level. He gains no attack speed off of attack speed items. It converts over to AD. So it's like, why would you not just get raw AD since it has a better conversion ratio? Like a raw AD item that also gives crit. Usually you have to get the, you know, the Zeal item so you get the crit because you obviously want the crit, but it's like, why not just Essence Reaver? I mean, he can use the mana early, which is nice, but I would just want it just for the crit plus the raw AD because crit and raw AD are awesome together. And just kind of like these other champions that I keep recommending potential Essence Reaver on, his abilities benefit from AD. They don't benefit from crit. So, like, his grenade does extra damage off of that. His ult does extra damage off of AD. His ult doesn't crit. His fourth shot crits, but it has no interaction with critical strike, the stat. And a lot of his damage comes from his abilities. You know, it comes from that grenade. It comes from his W. It comes from his ult. And so that's what I think. I don't know why nobody does that on him. I mean, maybe there's something, like, really obvious that I'm, like, overlooking. But, yeah, people just don't ever get that item on him. I mean, okay, he does. Reckless did. Reckless is with the program. But once again, I think this is something that a lot of people are just really loafing around on. They're just really not doing the math on these items, I don't think. And just like going double Zeal, I think you're just selling yourself really short. I mean, obviously Viper's probably the best AD carry in the world. I'm sure he studied it. Maybe there's something that, you know, I'm overlooking here, but maybe in pro play, like, you can't do that for some reason. Maybe you need the extra movement speed off of the Zeal items. Maybe I'm discounting the movement speed too much. You do get an extra, you know, 5% movement speed off the Zeal items, but I don't know. You do get a shield off of Phantom Dancer. There's a couple. It's mostly just Reckless that's trying this, but he is murdering people in these games. Maybe you get this if you're just, like, really far ahead. God, he lost when he was 13-1. That feels bad. I don't know. I'd try it out, though. Give it a whirl. See what you think. I think it could potentially be really good on him. And then finally, that's it. We're way too long on this. Caitlyn seems like she should be really good. She's not most of the time in solo queue. I don't think her win rate is that high overall. It's not. It's like 50%. Even though I realize I put Ezreal and Kai'Sa way above her. The problem with Caitlyn is you just have to be like a really, really good AD carry. You have to be like a diamond level AD carry because you're on the clock when you're Caitlyn. You have to push and you have to end the game early because her base attack speed is so god awful. It's like almost like 15 to 20% lower than other AD carries, and what that means is she doesn't scale very well at all with attack speed. So she has to go double Zeal items because she doesn't have abilities that scale. She does have some that scale with AD, but you would not want to get something like Essence Reaver on her. So you have to go double Zeal. So you're going to go Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire, Static on her, probably. And And just that really slow attack speed, like very conditional ult that you can't use in active combat. You can only use to try to run people down. It's just rough. You need to like be up in their face during the laning phase, landing a ton of auto attacks, really leveraging that 650 range. You need to be zoning with those traps, making it a nightmare for people to last hit under tower, and they need to be in their tower if you're playing Caitlyn. If you're getting pushed in, you need to reevaluate your life. If you're playing Caitlyn, you need to be pushing them in the whole time. The only person you should maybe get pushed in by would be something like Sivir in the laning phase. And Sivir is very good against Caitlyn. She gets a lot of extra mana off of her traps. So you just can't ever like use traps as Caitlyn if Sivir's out there. But yeah, it's just I see so many Caitlyn's when she's in my game, she just sits there and just tries to last hit and just like almost never auto attacks the enemy. It's just trying to farm it out against like a Jinx or a Vayne or something. It's like that's not how you play that champion. If you want to just farm it out, you know, you need to play Vayne or Jinx or, you know, something that just like takes over the game on 2 items. But like Caitlyn has to win. She has to push in with her Q. She has to auto attack people. She has to zone with her traps. She has to take towers, and she has to have really good macro, rotate around the map, and take all the towers. Like Caitlyn is very good once she gets to like 4 or 5 items late game. When she gets like her triple crit items or quad crit items, then she's pretty good. Like very, very late into the game when her headshots can almost one-shot people. And like her range is very difficult to deal with. But it's in that mid game, right, where her abilities are just like pretty easy to work around for most people, pretty easy to dodge, and she just gets run down and beaten up by almost everybody. So I just think she's too risky for solo queue. If you like Caitlyn, just play Jinx. She's just way better version of Caitlyn right now. Varus, trash. Like, just do not play Varus. He's a cool champ. He did get a buff on this patch, but it's really not an on-hit kind of patch. It's a crit patch. Yes, you can win with Varus if you want to. He's just going to get outscaled by a lot of other champs most of the time. And he just doesn't have a lot of mobility. I just think that Ashe is a better version of Varus right now. Misfortune can be good if you get ahead early, but kind of like Caitlyn, you have to really press your advantage. You have to be landing those Qs. You have to like get a huge advantage on your team whenever you get Ghostblade plus Dustblade. Now, she is very good if you're like auto-filled as AD carry and you have a really good team fight comp. So like you've got a Maokai and a Sejuani on your team. And you just want to hang out in the back and press R and just delete an enemy team. She can still be very good at that at team fights. But there's still going to be a lot of skirmishing going on out there, and a lot of people just don't leverage her early game enough. So she's still going to be pretty good. She's still got a pretty respectable win rate, I think, but there are probably better options. Heimerdinger, he was cool for a little while. I think he's really far out of the meta right now. The AD carries are just so strong. You really don't want to be running mages unless they're named Karthus or Cassiopeia in specific circumstances in the bot lane. Swain, don't do it. The other things are better. I guess you could do Vlad as well. Like, Vlad can be okay bottom. You know, Cassio, Karthus can be okay bottom, but Swain, not right now. Kalista, still not going to be that great. You know, critical strike champs are just going to blow her up before she sticks enough spears in them. If you are very good on her, if you can harass, put down a lot of pain early, then she can be good, but overall not going to be that great. Kog'Maw can be pretty good in some circumstances. With Lulu, he can be amazing. The problem is he's very vulnerable to ganks. He doesn't have a lot of mobility, and there are other champions that scale similar to how he does in the game, right? The Jinxes, the Vaynes, stuff like that. And I just think they're going to have a lot more utility than he does. But if he's paired with a Lulu, and if you're left alone and you get to farm up to like, you know, 2 items, and Lulu does a really good job of protecting you, yeah, Kog'Maw can be great. He is very great at shredding tanks. So if we do see a lot of tanks come in, you know, Kog'Maw could arguably move up to as high as tier 2. So I could be a little off on Kog, but that's where I've got him for now, just because I think he's so vulnerable, and I think there are other hyper carries that are also very good at breaking tanks, like Vayne, that have been buffed a lot, you know, over the last half a year, that are, you know, just more mobile and just better to play around different situations. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you do, and I'll see you next time.